Well, welcome. It's challenging to get people in here on the first 70-degree day of the year, isn't it? So just want to thank you guys for taking an interest in Mission Uganda and hearing about what the team did in Uganda and what God is continuing to do since we've been there and what we believe he's going to do in the future. So I'm just going to introduce the team real quick. This is Bruce Ingbers, Heather Cordes, and Derek DeHaan. We have two members that aren't here. The leader of Mission Uganda, Nupur Nunakovan, his son is getting married today. And apparently he offered a lot of money to the bride-to-be to be here, but she didn't accept. So pretty important to be at your kid's wedding. But he's not here. And then Don Van Haften is actually at the wedding as well. So, yeah, and Anna. I forgot about Anna. Anna is in Kenya. Anna is Derek's sister, and she actually flew from Kenya to Uganda and met us there. So we'll let the team introduce themselves and kind of give you their story of how God called them specifically to this mission trip, because each one of us has a unique story. This is going to be pretty, informal. If you got to get up and leave, do whatever you have to do. I know there's going to be kids running around, probably mine. At some point, but at the end, if we have time, I'd love to open it up for questions if you guys have questions. Also, we have information brochures on the back table back there. There's also some pictures and the blogs. If you didn't read the blogs from our trip, I'd highly recommend you do that because we tried to write them to give you a feel for what we were doing on a day-to-day basis and, make you feel like you were a part of the team by following along. So read those if you have an opportunity. Also, Heather has some things, some souvenirs that she had bought, as well as additional pictures. So, the mission. So, Nupur told us as a team before we even went to Mission Uganda that the main mission, and it's even written in the mission statement, is to preach the gospel. That's the mission, hands down, above anything else, is to preach the gospel to the people of Uganda. We had a secondary mission that went along with that. And for our team, it was delivering porridge to the schools. It was delivering math sets to the schools. It was delivering soccer balls to bless not only the schools, but the soccer tournament. There was a soccer tournament that was put on by the Golden Heart Foundation, which was the Ugandan team. And we're going to go through and talk a little bit about each mission and secondary mission. We're going to talk about the schools and the kids in Uganda, because if you don't know this, there's a huge problem with orphans. There's over 2 million orphans in the country Uganda. It's the highest amount of orphans in any country in the world. So it's an issue, and we want to try to help tackle that issue if possible. So the vision, I've got a video here I'm going to play next, but the vision for Mission Uganda, there was a team that went in July. They handed out the porridge, they handed out math sets, they also handed out school uniforms at the schools, because if you don't have a uniform at a lot of these schools, you don't get to go to school. $15 is what it costs, but a lot of these families can't afford a school uniform, so the kids don't go. So Nupur comes back from that mission trip in July, and he says, all right, Lord, what's next? What am I going to do next? And God gave him one word, and that word was soccer, and we'll let Nupur tell us about it.
Presentation this afternoon. Aaron asked me to explain how the soccer tournament came about that we did last February. So I want to tell you what happened. Last June, on the first Uganda mission trip, Maggie and I were talking about the trip and what was going to happen next year. And she said, well, so what are we going to do next, Nupur? I said, I don't know, but I think Papa will tell us. I said, let's just both pray about this and see what he says. So when I got back last summer, I was actually riding my bike and praying, and I remember praying, God, what do you want to do next in Uganda? And he gave me one word, soccer. So when I got back to the office that morning, I texted Maggie and said, God gave me one word when I prayed, and it was soccer. And she responded right away and just going crazy. Actually, she said, God gave me the same word yesterday. So that's how the soccer idea came about. Maggie then went to work with all her people in Uganda to get this all arranged, and we had these 8 soccer tournaments in all different villages, and we shared the gospel with them. So it was a huge success. And when I was there at the soccer tournaments, I remember walking around thinking, wow, how did this happen? Because there'd be thousands of people at this soccer match. And I remember saying to God, did one word really bring all this about? And that night I went to Maggie and talked to her, and I said, Maggie, I got to ask you a question. Is this really how this all came about, from one word from God? And she says, yes, Nooper, that's what happened. So that's how the soccer tournaments all started. So thank you. Bye.
So that's part of our mission for February. And so you heard Nooper mention the name Maggie, and we'll get to her in a second. Maggie is the leader of the Golden Heart Foundation, which is the Ugandan team. And what we've found out is you give her an idea and say, run with it, she runs with it, and she gets things done. The team that went before us in last July told us, Maggie is like the Mother Teresa of Uganda. Everybody respects her. She just loves everybody. And we saw that, and we felt that when we were with her. So they got the word soccer. So the next mission is to come up with a plan. How are we going to get this soccer idea put into motion? So Maggie goes to work, and they end up setting up soccer tournaments in 8 different parishes in the Mukono district. If you think of a parish, it'd be like a county, but smaller. And there's villages in each of these parishes. And so each village was going to have a team. So that was the plan. But Nooper needed a team, right? Nooper was on board. He founded Mission Uganda. He was going to go in February, but he needed a team, and at one point he had nobody. And Maggie has her team, and we'll get to her team in a minute. So the team comes together, and like I told you before, each one of us has a unique story of how it came about that we were called to be on the team. So I'll let Derek start on how you were specifically called to go on this mission trip.
Okay, sounds good. Well, I'm Derek DeHaan again, and my home church is Third in Pella. So great to be here with you guys today. So really my call kind of started way back in 2017. Right at the beginning of 2017, I took the course, The Journey, at Third, and it was led by Pastor Keith Corver. And Keith and I, we didn't really know each other going into the course, but we kind of had a connection, I would say, and we would stay maybe afterwards and talk a little bit, but we still didn't really know each other that well. So fast forward to it was fall of last year, probably September or October, I think somewhere in there. I'm in the auditorium service, and I'm standing in the back at Third, and Keith comes up to me, and he kind of taps me on the shoulder, and we just say hi to one another, and then we kind of go off, don't see each other for a little bit, and then he walks back to me, and he kind of comes up, and he says, Derek, do you want to get together some morning and just talk? I was like, okay, sure, sounds good. And so he says, okay, well, let's set something up. So I email him, we get something set up. So I go into his office an early morning, and we just start talking. And I'm kind of asking him about himself. He's asking me about myself. So I start kind of on my life story. I start at the beginning. I kind of work my way up. And I'm getting to high school, and I'm talking about how I was an athlete in high school. I played lots of sports. Played basketball. I hurt my hand my junior year of high school, and I really was looking to play basketball in college, but since I hurt my hand, I never really got anything back, and so I decided I would play soccer in college. And when I said the word soccer, all of a sudden Keith says, just a second, Derek, just stop. I'm like, okay. And he's like, I got to go get something for you. So he goes out of his office, he comes back, and he has a soccer ball in his hand, and he hands me the soccer ball, and he says, there's a group in February of next year that's going down to Uganda, and they're trying to bring hundreds of soccer balls with them to bless these children in Uganda. And he's saying, you know, they need some financial assistance, Derek, to make this happen. So would you and your wife be willing to pray about it if you would financially support this? So I said to Keith, I said, yeah. I was like, my wife and I will pray about this. We'll think about it, and I'll let you know. And then like before I could even get finished, like he goes, you know what, Derek? I think Jesus is asking you to take this soccer ball to Uganda. In my mind, I'm like, I don't think so, Keith. I don't think that's what Jesus is asking me to do. But I gave him the correct answer. I said, maybe, yeah, that might be. And then he says, you know what, Derek? I know you and Lindsay are going to pray about supporting these soccer balls and getting them there and all that. But he just looked me like dead in the eye, and he's just like, but the real question is, Derek, are you going to go? And I got to be honest, at that moment, like I wasn't prepared for that ask. And so I kind of sat back, and I'm just like, wow, you know, inside I'm thinking like, there's no way, like Jesus isn't asking me to do this. I got too many responsibilities at home, at work, in the community. There's no way. So anyway, so him and I kind of finish up. He gives me Nooper's information. He's like, Nooper's going to want to talk to you. I'm like, okay. So I jump back in my car, and the first thing I do, I just kind of let my wife know that I was going back to work, basically. And so it's kind of funny because both her and I have heard this said about Pastor Keith is he's a heavenly hound. So she first like responds back to me. She's like, she knew I was meeting with Keith, and she says, so what did Keith ask you to do, Derek? And I was like, well, why is she even asking me that? And then so I did tell her right there, we were just kind of texting back and forth. I was like, oh, there's these soccer balls, and there's a trip to Uganda. I want you to pray about, you know, possibly financially helping them do this together. And so I didn't even tell her about the possibility of me going to Uganda at that point. But then later that night, then I got home, and you know, we started talking again. We were talking about soccer balls, and I'm like, well, there was one other thing that Keith had asked me too. She's like, okay, well, what is it? And I'm thinking in my mind, I'm like, I'm going to tell her this, and she's going to be like, Derek, there is no way you're going to leave me here with our four daughters, and you've got all these other things you got to do. But anyway, so I tell her, I say, Keith said that he thinks Jesus is asking me to go to Uganda with these soccer balls. And like, she just looks at me and she's like, I think Jesus is asking you to do that. And I, again, in my mind, I'm like, God, what are you doing? Like, no, you know, I don't think that's what he's asking me to do. So anyway, then I go about my business, and I talk to Nooper as kind of my next step. And so I talk to Nooper, and Nooper talks about, again, the first mission in Mission Uganda is to preach the gospel. And so I say, well, man, like, I'm not a preacher. I'm not going to have the right words, Nooper, you know. But then I'm done talking to him, and I go back home, and that night I get into my journal, and in my journal I kind of started this list. It was just called, honestly, it's called The List. And it's just some like odd things, like not normal things I would do like in life, like come up with an original joke or write a song, flip a house, just some different things. But then on this list, I have on there, preach a sermon. It's right here on my list, and I'd love to show you. And so I'm just like, God, what are you doing? Like, you know, my heart's starting to soften. It's starting to soften, but like, I'm still not even all in at this point. I'm like, well, maybe. So I go and talk to Katie Peterson, and she had gone on the trip in July. And I talked to her, and we get through that. And then I jump in my car after I'm done talking to her, and the song All In by Matthew West comes on. And I'm just like, okay, this all in phrase basically is the phrase that I've been using with my youth group, my mixed boys at Third. We've been using this term all in on Jesus for like the last year, basically. We've been talking about there's three phases. There's three roads. You got the road of I don't know Jesus, I don't want to know Jesus, I'm not going to follow Jesus. And then we got this murky middle, which is I'm kind of in on Jesus, and I'm kind of not in on Jesus, but I'm maybe working towards getting in on Jesus. And then there's the all in on Jesus. And so when that song came on, it just like, I kind of let the words just like rush over me, and I'm just like, okay, I got it, God. I'm going to Uganda. And so after that, then I listened to the song. I was driving, I think either back to my house or the office, and I called Nooper up and I told him God's calling me to go to Uganda. So.
Hi there. So I'm Heather Cordes. I attend church here at the Way, so I know many of you. My story kind of starts back. I would hear people that would go on mission trips, and deep down I thought, boy, that's awesome. I wish I could do that, but I knew I never could. Then I had lovely Bryce Embers approached me. Actually, before when he went last year, I had that tug going, gosh, I wish I could do something like that. After he went, he kind of approached me and said, I think you really should think about this. God laid on his heart that maybe I should go. And there again, I thought there's no way I can go. I've never done something like this. I've never traveled out of the country besides on a cruise ship, and I don't think that really counts. So I was very fearful of leaving my family, traveling overseas. So when that seed was planted, I kind of had this fight going on in my mind, telling me, you can't do this. Same as Derek, you're going to go preach the gospel. I can't do that. I'm not educated like that. I wouldn't know what to say. I wouldn't know how to do it. So I kept praying about it, talking to friends, talking to the girls here at church. And I'll never forget, my best friend said, if you feel God is asking you to do something, do you really want to tell him no? And do you want to live with the consequences of not obeying what God is asking you to do? So that resonated with me. I'm very busy. My husband and I have 2 small children at home. He's busy farming. We own businesses. I work for a corporate office. So my day-to-day is very busy, and the thought of leaving my family, my work, my stores for 2 weeks, leaving my husband to tend to our 2 small children, I just thought there's no way I can do this. So I approached my husband, and my father-in-law happened to be there at the same time, saying, I feel God is calling me to do this, thinking my husband would say, no way. But the response was, I'm not going to stand between you and God. So I had the support of my husband. My father-in-law said the same thing. If you feel God is calling you, you need to listen to God. I can remember sitting in a church service the Sunday after the Saturday night service talking about Uganda, and I wasn't here at that Saturday night service. But that Sunday absolutely wrecked me at church. Couldn't stop, I had tears. I come up and knelt at the stage, praying like, God, why are you calling me? I am not capable of doing this. So I struggled for a while going, why are you calling me? And I finally had to accept I wasn't going to have the answer as to why. I didn't know what he would have in store for me. I just knew that was God's plan. So once I finally gave in and said, okay, I'm going to go, all of my fears, they just disappeared. I had fears of getting sick over there, just fears of traveling. To be honest, I was afraid of what I would eat for 10 days over there. They don't eat like us. So I was fearful of a lot of things. Fearful, you hear of Christians getting killed, sharing the gospel in other countries. I have 2 small boys and a husband at home. I mean, why would God ask me to go put my life in danger? Bryce assured me there was never any feelings of safety, and I can attest to that. After being there, we were safe the whole time. But I finally just listened to what God was telling me to do, committed to going. Fears were gone, and even the busyness of my everyday life when I was there, it was so peaceful. I wasn't worried about what was left back at home, and we were there to do God's mission, to share the love of Jesus with those kids, to love on those kids. It was truly life-changing, and I'm blessed that God called me to go.
Good afternoon. It's good to see you all here. Thank you very much. And you might be asking yourselves in the back of your minds, well, what kind of a person is it that gets called to mission? And I think that my call to mission probably started many, many, many years ago, and I didn't even know it. When I was just 18 years old and just out of high school, I worked with an old Dutchman. And I worked with him for 10 years. He taught me everything I knew about carpentry and that type of thing. He told me when I was 18 years old, and he knew me pretty well. He said, and he was an old Dutchman. If I talk like him, you wouldn't understand what I'm saying, so I'll just say it in my Dutch. But he said, Brucey, he said, I think your dad would like to have a preacher, but he ain't going to get one, is he? That was pretty encouraging. And then... I spent the rest of my adult life building houses and just working in the everyday life. And then Bryce went to Uganda, and I've always had in the back of my mind, when I heard Bryce tell stories, and I heard stories from the rest of the people that had gone, what a wonderful experience that might be. And back when I say that it started many, many years ago, back when I was young, and I don't know for sure when it was, I don't know, but I won't say I had a vision, but I had a dream of standing up in front of a group of people and preaching the gospel, one hand in the air with the Bible in the other hand. And it was a dream that I had, and I kind of dismissed that, but I always kind of had a feeling in the back of my mind that something was missing in my life and that God was calling me to something better and bigger than what I had. And when this opportunity came, I felt like, this is what God really wants me to do. I felt that calling to go. And then I was looking for affirmation and stuff. And when my wife Sue said it was okay to go, that was enough. I think she was one of those people who thought maybe I would go over to Africa and not come home. But that wasn't the case. I came back home. Anyway, when we got to Africa, we met, and Aaron's got a picture of Annalisa on the screen right here. And to meet Annalisa was one of the most enjoyable, fulfilling times of my life, the time that I spent with her. But when I was getting to know Annalisa and Derek, Annalisa told me that she was talking to her dad, and her dad was asking who was going on this mission trip, and Anna told her dad that some of the people that were going on, and she said, and Bruce Engbers is going, and she told me, now this is what she told me. This is what she said. She said, my dad said, Bruce Engbers. Guy's a little rough around the edges. She said, but I think you'll get along with him just fine. Well, you know what? I'm still a little rough around the edges, Ralph. With me and your daughter, we got along famously. And for me, as one of those, me and Nooper, we were the old people of the trip, and all these young guys. We were able to sit back and watch God work wonderful ways in their lives and see lives changed. But Nooper says we're the incredibly handsome, white-haired, bald guys, and so that's what we were on the trip. But it's amazing because you ask who would be called to mission, but you're called to mission if you believe that. If you believe that Jesus Christ is your Lord and Savior, and you have a relationship with Him, then you have a responsibility, because we're all given that Great Commission. And Aaron's going to talk about that a little bit later on. But God is good all the time. All the time, guys. Amen.
Check. My name is Aaron Groves. How I was called to the trip. I got invited to Bryce and Kathy Ingber's home for dinner one night. And this was right after Bryce had went to Uganda in July. And they tell us all about the trip, and he looks right at my wife and he says, Tricia, you'd be great on the mission trip. And that was it. And fast forward a couple weeks, and I told my wife, I'm like, I feel like I'm getting tugged to go on this mission trip. And her initial response was, you are not cut out for a mission trip. You're the pickiest eater I know, and you can't sleep anywhere but your own bed. This isn't going to work. But the Lord just kept tugging on my heart. And I met with Bryce for coffee a little later, a month or so later, and I wanted to know more about the trip. So he's telling me about the trip, and as he's telling me about this trip, I just started getting this vision and these pictures in my head of me in Africa playing soccer with the kids. And this is pre-broken leg. So in August, I broke my leg, late August. So the vision probably would have been different had I broke my leg sooner. But that started a process in me where, like, man, maybe I really am called to go on this trip. I need to look into this more. I need to talk to Nooper. I break my leg. Or no, I didn't break my leg yet. I'm on my way to Knoxville for work, and I play a podcast of Third Reformed Church of Nooper talking about the mission trip. And as I'm driving, I just start crying, hearing the stories about what happened in Uganda. And there's only been a handful of times in my life where I've been completely overcome by the Holy Spirit, and I just start crying. But that's how I know that God's moving and doing something in me. And I knew in that moment I was going. And I was going to tell my wife, and I told her, and she was supportive of it. And then I broke my leg in late August, met with Nooper. Wasn't sure how this was all going to play out. I thought, well, I'll pay my fees and pay to go over there, and if I can't go over there, somebody else will go. And I happened to heal enough before that to be able to go. But, God made it very clear to me, and I think he made it clear to each and every one of us that we were supposed to go on this trip. And if we had tried to go on a trip that we weren't being called to, it would have been probably disastrous for us and the team. And I think I know the reason that we bonded so well together, we worked so well together, and like, man, we were just able to just pour out love into the people is because we were all called there, each and every one of us. And in that trip, I mean, I have a special relationship with each one of these people that have been on the mission trip with me, and it's because we have shared something that, I mean, we can sit here and talk about it, but to experience it is completely different. And I don't know, it's just a special bond. So that's the story of how we were all called. That was the American team. The most vital part of this mission trip was the Golden Heart team. All right, I showed you that picture of Margaret or Maggie. Maggie is the head, the leader of this team. So the rest of these guys and gals on this team are all volunteers. They get paid nothing. So for 2 weeks, they volunteered their time and their effort. Some of them already have nothing anyway. And what work they do have is the very little money that they bring in. But each one of them has such a unique story of how they got called to the Golden Heart team. And you can see Dennis there. Dennis is Maggie's husband. And if there's any question as to, can we trust the Golden Heart team? Are they trying to pull the wool over our eyes and just take our money in? The answer is no. Meeting these people firsthand, Dennis and Maggie, they are so focused on Jesus. Like their heart, every day, it's like, man, how did they align themselves with God's will so well? Because he gives them an idea or a vision, and they run with it, not knowing how it's going to happen, and God just brings in the resources. God brings in the people. It's just like the story you heard about the soccer. She basically put it all together, said, Nooper, this is how much money I need for this soccer tournament to happen. It happens, and we'll talk a little bit more about it, and it was just amazing how smooth and how well it was ran. Does anybody want to introduce the Golden Heart team, or do you want me to talk about it? Anybody? All right. So Dennis and Maggie husband, Noah. Noah has an amazing story. I suggest that you read the blog about his story. He was kidnapped at 14 years old, and thrown into an army to fight against Idi Amin. And so he was basically a child soldier. And he grew up Muslim. And actually, Maggie brought him onto the team when he was still a practicing Muslim. And within a month, he asked, "Why haven't you asked me to accept Jesus?" He said, "I see how much you love people, and I see what Jesus does through you guys. I want to know him too." And so he surrendered his life to Christ. But it was because Maggie gave him a chance to be a part of the team that he was able to surrender his life. Meshach there in the middle. Meshach came from a family of cow farmers, which worked out great because the trophy for the soccer tournament was a cow. So he took care of all that. He took care of feeding and watering them every day. He was up at 0500 in the morning, taking care of them and wrangling them and pulling them out on the soccer field, which was entertaining. But Meshach, he literally has nothing, and he volunteered his time for 2 weeks to be with Maggie and the team and to help us. William is a pastor over in Uganda. William is one of the most animated people. Yep, he had like this karate chop going on when he was preaching on the stage, and he would, Mission Uganda, Mission Uganda. He was always yelling and saying something on the stage. They literally had to steal the microphone from him because he wouldn't give it up. Tony is Maggie's right-hand man. He's basically the secretary of Golden Heart Foundation. He lives on the property. And all these guys, we never once felt unsafe on the mission trip because they were always watching. They were always right by us, making sure we were being watched and taken care of. If somebody left their backpack to get up and do something, they grabbed the backpack. These guys were so good at taking care of us. I was humbled to be a part of their team with them. So the mission work. We showed up, got into the Entebbe airport about midnight, or 2300, 11 p.m. on the 11th. We took off at 1 o'clock from Des Moines Airport on the 10th. We actually got to meet Anna at the airport in Entebbe at 11 p.m. Over a day later. And the next morning we were up early, starting our day because we had work to do the next day. Does anybody want to take us through the typical day? Go ahead, Heather.
So as Aaron has up there, kind of a typical day for us, we'd start at about 6:30 in the morning with morning devotions. And that was just a really powerful time for all of us. I know just kind of just getting us in the right mindset and having the Spirit kind of fall on us to let us, the whole idea that we talked about was, bringing kingdom down to earth. And that's how all of us felt. I know the whole time we were there, but really it started in those early morning hours. Even before any of the work was being done, it was really getting in tune with the Spirit. And, we shared different things during that time as well. And it was just a very special time for all of us. So after that, then we would jump on the bus. It is basically a big passenger bus that probably hold, 30 people, probably, something like that. And so we jump on the bus and we'd go to the different places basically that we're going to go to for that day. Most likely it was we'd go to a school and then they would bring other schools to that school. So there would be multiple schools in one location. That way we didn't have to drive from one school to another school to another school. They'd bring 4, 5, 6, 10 other schools into one place. Oh, and then bringing the kids there, they don't have vehicles or anything like that. So they're walking, who even knows how long they were walking? Miles, and it's really, really hot. It was incredibly hot too when we were there. They were even saying it was hot for them. So for us, it was like, this is crazy. But so those schools would all come together, and then we would go to the schools. And again, the first thing, what I loved so much about it was, the first thing we get there, and Maggie's talking to the kids at the school and talking to the administration, and right off the bat, they know we're here for Jesus. Right off the bat, it's not, they see the porridge, they see there's mass sets being set out, but they know that we are here to talk to them about Jesus. And that was just so amazing. Like, again, just right off the bat, there's no question about why we're here. It's here to say, do you know Jesus? And if you don't know about Jesus, we want to talk to you about Jesus. And so that was just really, really cool to have. And then, of course, we'd have the blessings that we were bringing along, too. So we have the porridge. And so these kids, they may not have had a meal that day or the last couple days, or who knows how long it was before that they had a meal. Well, seeing this porridge come through, these kids will know that they're going to get at least one meal a day as long as they're at school. So that's just like huge for them to see. And then the mass sets, and we can kind of get into all these different blessings too, but we handed out mass sets, and then we handed out soccer balls to each of the schools as well. And so just being with all these different schools and seeing the kids, and you'd walk off the bus, and I kind of relate it to like a movie star or a sports star stepping off of a bus. Like, you step off the bus, and these kids are looking up at you like they've never seen somebody so amazing in their entire life, and they want to hold your hand. And I think we were told a little bit of the story is there's some stories down there of white people are ghosts. So lots of times too, they'll touch your skin to kind of make sure that you're real and not transparent. On me, a lot of times I know a lot of them wanted to touch the hair on my arms, and their skin was so smooth, and then my arm wasn't so smooth. To them, they just thought it was so funny. But I just loved it. Like, I'd literally put my hand down. I know all of us probably had it too. I just have my hand down at my side, and I have like 3 or 4 little boys or girls just come and like grab my hand. Like, they just want to hold my hand. They just want to feel loved, even if it's for 10 minutes. And so it was amazing, because you could pour all of this love and again, I remember showing pictures back to my family, my wife, my girls, and my mom, or my wife was just like, she's like, you know what, Derek, I wouldn't have been so opposed if you would have taken a few of those home to us. But that's how you feel. Like, you just want to love on them and bring them with you. So we kind of did all of that in the morning hours, and then we'd drive to the soccer tournament. So where am I at now? Soccer tournament about 1:30 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And so we'd eat lunch in the van, and then the soccer tournament was set up. And again, the soccer tournament, the whole thing, they have the soccer tournament going on. They have this big stage all set up for the team to kind of come to. But again, like, Maggie gets up on the stage, and before any of the soccer in the final match is going to happen, like, we're going to talk about Jesus right here. Like, and that's like before anything else is happening. So again, like, they know our intention of being here is not for anything else other than to bring Jesus. And so I think what we tried to do, the first day was a little bit, we were trying to work out the kinks probably the first day. But after that, then Newper kind of asked each of us to basically share the gospel then at each of those soccer tournaments. So that's what we tried to do. We kind of asked one of us one day, and we would share before that final match began. And so the final match went off, and they do. It's like World Cup. They have their kids with them. They're playing the Ugandan national anthem. They played our national anthem a few of the tournaments as well. It was just really cool. And then they'd play on these fields that are like this. I mean, it's just like a wave up and down. Like, how can they even play on that? But they were pretty talented, I would say. Like I said, lots of the teams had a lot of really amazing talent. I think there was even a story of, wasn't it one of the refs had come and he saw one of the guys playing? And maybe, Aaron, maybe you know a little bit more about that.
So the referees over there are like Uganda's sanctioned referees, and so they were hired by the Golden Heart to referee these matches, and they saw a kid, and part of what they do is they recruit as well for professional teams. So they saw this kid with this amazing talent, and by the next day, he was in a different city in Uganda, signed up with a soccer club. And so because of the soccer tournament, that kid's life is just dramatically changed.
Yeah, that was the point that I was going to get to as well. Is, I mean, just think about it. Like, this soccer tournament goes off. This kid has no idea that there's possibly like a scout there. He's just there to play soccer, to play football. And now God's changed his entire outlook. And it's just, yeah, it's amazing. So we did that. After a few of the soccer tournaments, I know the first couple, there was like this really intense feeling of prayer over lots of the people that were there. So we'd pray over people after the tournaments were done. And again, you jump back on the bus and you're like rock stars, like you're leaving, everyone's waving at you. And so then we'd get back home and we'd kind of get cleaned up and we'd have supper in the evening. And then we'd go to bed and we'd do it again the next day.
So Derek kind of touched about morning devotionals. It was, to me, it was essential for to start the day off right. We would just come quiet before the Lord. We would pray together as a team. We'd share kind of our stories, and we would just see what God was laying on our heart for the day. And out of that, our skit came about, and we can talk more about that when we get into the school section. But just taking that time early in the morning, and it's something I've tried to do since I've even been back, is to get up, and I am not a morning person, but to be able to get up early and to just kind of sit with the Lord, to read Scripture, to pray, man, it just seems to make the day go better. So the schools. I know for me, and I'll have somebody else talk about this, the schools were an eye-opener just from the fact of they're so poor. These kids are walking for miles to get to school. You see the picture there on the right. Like that, being farmers from Iowa, is that even a fit building to put your animals in? Right? And you look up, you go in there, and there's just a line in the roof, so when it rains, it pours in the building too. One of the schools we went to, the kindergarten class didn't have a classroom. They did class outside. There was no money to build them a classroom. So, I don't know. Does somebody want to touch on just the feeling they got when they were in these schools?
So yeah, that first day, the farm-looking shed was the first school we encountered. Dirt floor, and literally, we have a cattle barn in our farm, and it's not the greatest, but it's hands down better than that. Where the cooks are, they cook outside. Some of them kind of have a little roof over them. Most of them didn't. They cooked over just open flame sticks, big pot. They'd make porridge with a big paddle. If they were lucky, they had a little pot of beans so that those children could get some protein also. And again, we talked about many of the schools, the kids didn't even get to eat. If the parents didn't pay, those children would walk around with an empty cup. So we were at a lot of the schools right when it was their lunchtime. So we got to kind of see that. We got to see the ladies cooking their meal and see the kids. Some of them would only get served half a cup or a fourth of a cup. And a lot of it depended on if their parents had sent the money or if they even had it to provide. Amazed me that these children walked so far and they're so little bitty kids. No parents walking to or from school with them. They're just sent out and they go on their own for 1 mile, 2 miles, whatever it may be. As you can see, the wooden bench type desk, we encountered those about every single school. So it's just basically a flat board they sit on, and a flat board is their desktop. That bottom picture, the second one over, that's that first school with a dirt floor. It looks like a cattle building. Every schoolroom had a chalkboard. Many of them had no books, no papers, no supplies. I don't know how they did their lessons, but they didn't have materials. There were some schools that you would see the kids carrying a notebook, and it looked like they probably carried that for the whole year or 2 years. I took a bag of pencils that I had accumulated for years and years and years at our house, a big Ziploc, and I started handing those out to the children, And you have to be careful when you hand out because they flock to you. Once they see they're getting something, you'll get bombarded. But I was lucky enough, I think it was school had started back up. There were still a few kids out, so I was handing them pencils, and they were so appreciative of a pencil used that was that long. They were bowing down, and that was their symbol of saying thank you. So these children were so blessed by a used pencil or a pencil that didn't even have an eraser. I just took them all. I thought, we don't need them, but that they can use those. So school supplies, they desperately need. Trying to think of what else. The children, we got to visit with some of the head teachers and their administrative team. They were very appreciative of us coming. Many children thanked us for bringing them porridge. And I had to ask myself, how often do our children thank us or the lunch ladies for feeding them at school? Our kids, it's just taken for granted they get food at school every day. These children were thanking us by looking at a bag of porridge that we were bringing because they knew they were going to be provided food. So that was heavy on my heart, just their appreciation for something that I think our children take for granted. But the schools, some of them were a little nicer. They had cement floors, had more supplies there. But overall, their schools were very, very, very poor and in desperate need of a lot of materials.
Why don't you share? So Heather was like a kid magnet. You can kind of see it in the picture there. Like the kids flocked to her. Anna was the same way. The kids flocked to her. And then I would always see Bruce and Derek would always have one or two kids on their lap. Like they always had kids with them. And I found myself at one point, and I wrote about this in the blog, is that, man, just the amount of love that I saw pouring out from this team, I was like, Lord, give me that same heart that these guys have, because it was just amazing to watch them. I don't know, do you guys want to touch just on the joy that these kids had as we were around them? And, I wrote this note on there, like, these kids literally have nothing. Some of them didn't have shoes that they were wearing, walking miles to school. But yet, their joy wasn't found in material possessions, like I think a lot of us have here in America. And they were just happy. Their hope and their joy was in Jesus.
I think for a lot of the kids, Aaron shared before we started about the number of kids over there that were orphans. And the number of kids that really, I think especially male influences and stuff in their lives. There a lot of the teachers and stuff that were in the schools and stuff were males as well. But it seemed like Heather and Dawn. When Heather or when Dawn told the kids that she loved hugs, and everybody was supposed to give Dawn a hug. Oh my goodness! It just cleared. The benches just cleared, and poor Dawn, it was just like a mob on the floor, But it seems like Derek mentioned when you step off the bus that it was just like you were some kind of a rock star or something. But you would step off the bus, and there would be children. Hundreds and hundreds of children. You can see that in the pictures. And you would look around, and Aaron talks about that one or two that Derek and I would have around us. And it was like you would look, and you weren't looking for anything special, but all of a sudden it was, boom, there's the one. It was like, that one. And as soon as you made eye contact with that child, I don't care if it was a little boy or a little girl, they would come to you. A lot of them wouldn't come up to you until you made that eye contact. But boy, I tell you what, once you did, it was just like, wow. And Derek talked about them wanting to hold your hand and stuff. They sit there and pull that. It was like getting mosquito bit. They'd be pulling the hair in your arms and stuff. What? Just leave me alone, kid. But you couldn't do that, You just want to love them up. But unbelievable love and affection those children showed.
So Derek kind of talked about this. The mission at these schools, primary mission was to watch Jesus move by preaching the gospel and asking if these kids wanted to accept Christ into their hearts. And we'd have the opportunity to pray over them. And it was powerful. And one of the most impactful moments for me was, we were at these schools and kids that were going to Muslim schools were accepting Christ into their hearts. And I think that's huge. But the main mission was to preach the gospel at the schools. Again, prayer was important. There were numerous times that, we'd be specifically asked, or somebody would feel a nudge or a push to pray for a specific kid, whether it was just a physical ailment that we saw, or that God was just laying on our heart to just pray over this kid. And again, just some powerful moments. You can see up there in the upper left-hand corner, just praying over these children and just asking God to just pour out his Spirit into these children and just to cover them.
So every day at every school we did a skit to allow the children to participate and learn about Jesus and accept Jesus. So Aaron would get up and talk, and then Maggie would translate in their Luganda language. The children are taught English in the school, so they understand it, but they don't understand our accent. So they would then translate it so they could understand. But Aaron would give the message about, in life you can choose the right way or the wrong way. And we talked about the wide path and the narrow path. So we gave him a little sermon about that, and then we would provide a skit. We had some of the team that would play. We had one holding a sign that was Satan, and one holding, was it saying heaven or God? Jesus. There we go, Jesus. So we would allow the children to choose. So Pappy here, he got to make the bad choice every time. So Pappy chose the road to hell every time, and we had people there enticing him with
slow learner,
enticing him with money or candy, medicine bottles, encouraging him, come. And so Pappy, unfortunately, every time took the wide road. And I got to take the narrow road each time. That was much better. But I always played with the kids. I pretended like I was going to take the wide road. And I'd be like, oh, but they got candy and there's money. And I'd look at them going, do I go that way or this way? And all the kids are pointing, to the narrow path. They're trying to tell me. And when I try to go to the wide, they would be, no. And even the Muslim children were pointing, no, go to the narrow path. So, of course, I would go through the narrow path and go into the arms of Jesus. And then we would turn it to allow the children. We would start with a few, letting them make the choice. Do you want to choose? Which way do you want to go? And we perfected our skit as we went along, but it was amazing. We have some video. I don't know if that'll get showed or not, but of the floods of children running to the arms of Jesus and accepting Jesus. So that was a critical part to each one of our school missions.
So the secondary mission, and Derek talked a little bit about it, was to provide porridge. Newper, when he first went over to Uganda, was impacted about the number of kids that go hungry throughout the day because they're not getting fed. And, he would tell the teachers, I know that students learn better with a full belly. So that's why we're here. We're here to provide porridge and to provide food and nourishment for these children, to feed them and give them a chance because their parents can't afford it, or maybe the school can't even get their hands on it. And literally, we would show up at these schools and they were tearing open the porridge and cooking it that day. That's how in need they were of this porridge. In the middle there with the motorcycle, so these other schools would come when one of the parents or one of the instructors would ride a motorcycle. They call them bodas over there. They were everywhere, motorcycles everywhere. But you can see they put these 100-pound bags. Some of them had 3 bags of porridge they put on the motorcycles, and they'd take off down the dirt road and transport it to their school.
And you can see the kitchen. That's the porridge being cooked up there, and that's in the top left is one of the cooks. And it's outside. Not very sanitary.
Math sets. Anybody want to talk about math sets? Anybody know anything about math sets? I do, if nobody does. Okay. So the kids in Uganda, after their 6th grade year, which is called P7 over there, they have to take a national exam. In that national exam, they have to take a math test. They have to use a ruler, a compass, a protractor, and a lot of them don't have that to take the math test. It's not provided for them. So what happens? They fail the test, they don't move on. They don't take the test, they don't move on. So here we have a lot of kids with a 6th grade education just because they don't have these tools to take this test. So Newper wanted to provide these math sets. The math sets are all assembled in Uganda. The porridge, we didn't mention this, the porridge is all milled in Uganda, right? We don't want to bring things from America and just pour it in there. We want to buy things from Uganda to provide some economic stability over there, or to help them with their economy. So the math sets are all assembled in Uganda. We hand them out to all the P7 students, and they all get what I just said, plus a pencil sharpener and a pencil. And they're all very thankful and excited. You can see in the bottom right-hand corner there, they're holding up their little math set. Soccer balls. So, Derek, I'm going to let you talk about soccer balls. I just want to preface this. So, the soccer balls was new. We'd never handed out soccer balls before this trip in February. But because of the soccer tournament, they thought, well, let's bless the schools with a soccer ball. They had been to these other schools, and you can see in the middle picture there on the bottom, Anna's got a ball that they typically use. That's a string. That's just a ball wrapped up in string. That's what they used for a soccer ball. And the other ball, the nice one, is what we provided them. So a lot of times they also use trash wrapped up in banana leaves as their soccer ball. Not a real great ball to play soccer with. So this was a blessing to be able to hand it out to him. And Derek took it upon himself to fund the balls. So every school we went to, we found it just so fitting and humbling to watch him hand out these balls to the kids.
Yeah, those were amazing moments. It was, when Keith, I told you the story of him telling me that, I know you're going to think about financially supporting getting these soccer balls to Uganda, but really the question is, Derek, are you going to take this soccer ball and go yourself? And so handing those balls out to literally hundreds and thousands of kids and seeing their faces, it was so humbling. It was just, it was prophetic, obviously, from Pastor Keith. It was amazing every time. And just seeing their faces light up when you, even just pulling the soccer balls out, I'm oh my goodness, it's like the best Christmas gift you could ever get. I think of one of my nephews, when he opens up, he used to when he was a lot smaller, he'd open up every gift. And it was the biggest surprise he's ever gotten in his life. It's oh my goodness, this is the best thing that ever happened to me. And these kids, every time they'd see a football, it's wow, this is amazing. I'm actually holding the football now, and all my classmates are jealous that I have the football in my hands. And I think a lot of times, even think Aaron and Anna, you kind of kick the soccer ball around with them after they got it. And I know too, a lot of the kids, after we'd give the soccer balls out, they'd all be do you have any more footballs? Each kid wants a football themselves, obviously, and we're only giving one out to the school so they have one. But everyone wants a football. And again, even before you'd ask, who likes football? And it's every hand's in the air and as high as it can go. Do you like football? Oh, we love football. That's the craziest question even to ask. They're just so in love with it. And that's why the story of Newper getting the word soccer and Maggie getting the word soccer and then bringing this all together, it's just, it was God ordained and it was destiny that those balls were to be there for them. I think we were all just, so humbled to be a part of that.
It was also entertaining, too, because Newper would always introduce Derek as Derek Ronaldo. And if you know soccer, Ronaldo is this famous soccer player. And, Newper would just, put you on a pedestal. Derek is just an amazing soccer player back home, blah, blah, blah. But it was always fun to watch the kids react to that.
Well, I think he started with saying that I kind of played some soccer back at home. And then it was, he's a really good soccer player. And then he's a really famous soccer player back at home. And then ultimately, I think it was he's the most world famous soccer player ever. And so, it went from, one range to another really, really quickly.
We had to pray for Newper every night because he embellished something fierce,
So the tournament, we weren't really sure like what this was going to be about. Like we were told about this soccer tournament, and you think, all right, it's Uganda. Like, how good of a soccer tournament is going to be? Is anybody even going to show up? How are they going to get the word out? And this ended up being such an amazing platform to talk about Christ, to share testimonies, and to speak to the hearts of the people. And we were getting kids there, but we were also getting adults. And what we were told is that for a lot of families, this was the first time they'd ever watched their kids play soccer. So here you have these kids, 14 to 25 years old, and mom or dad, if they have them, had never watched them play before. So this was their first opportunity. And it was also a surprise when we found out that the winning team got a cow as a trophy. So they got this bull, and you would think it was like gold over there because everybody wanted a piece of the cow. Everybody wanted a piece of the bull. That thing was probably the greatest trophy we could hand out, and Maggie knew it. So that's why that was the prize. And the thought was, let's give them the bull to take back to their village, right? So they can use the bull to breed with other cows to provide some stability, some sustainment for food and maybe milk. And so, and after the team won, I've got video later of they're jumping up and down, yelling, singing, and cheering. Some of them got on the bull and rode it. It was nuts. But just a great platform, and the Golden Heart team did an amazing job of setting it up, and it ran smoothly. Anything else I'm missing? It was kind of entertaining, too, because each village had their own commentator, and they'd give them a microphone. So you'd hear them up there just chattering and talking, and it was pure entertainment. But just well run, very well run. And I tallied up the 8 tournaments. It was over 10,000 people that we were able to share the gospel with. So what's next? The next mission team going. It's going to be very similar to what we did in February. The tournament was so successful, and just not the blessings that were poured out, but the amount of people that were reached, and the way in which we were able to present the gospel, that is basically going to be a duplicate come this late July, August. So the next team that's going, and there's several members from this church that are going again, and we're excited to send them off. But yeah, the tournament is going to be replicated. I think this time, instead of, I don't know if they're handing out soccer balls again, but they're going to be doing school uniforms, I think. So the question is, are you being called? And, not everybody is called to go on a mission trip. But there's ways to support it. Prayer is an important piece. You saw over there how we were praying hourly. We were in prayer. And prayer works. The Bible tells us it works. The Bible calls on us to pray. We had people praying for us back here, and I had one friend that set her alarm every day and would pray for us as we were over there. And I can only believe that, God heard their prayers, and he was just pouring it out on us over there in Uganda to do his work. Supporting, for me, we had people, it snowed a lot here when I was gone. I typically snow below the driveway. We had my family, we had friends, we had neighbors that came to my house and shoveled our drive. They didn't have to do that. We had people that wanted to buy food for my wife and kids, so my wife didn't have to cook. They didn't have to do that. That's how they felt called to support the mission. And obviously giving. The only reason this happens is because Newper goes out and he fundraises and people give. Right? It costs about $50,000 a trip to make all this stuff happen, to purchase the porridge, to get the soccer tournament, to get everything run, to hire the drivers and the help, to have the porridge milled. It costs money. Everybody up here funded their own way to Uganda. so that the money that was being fundraised could go directly to the aid and the mission. Sponsoring, we're going to talk here in a minute about sponsoring kids, because some of us, in doing this, we felt like as a team, we were called to help these orphan kids over there. Even if it's just one, we felt like we're called to see what we can do to help these kids. So I'll let, if Heather, you want to talk about Dorothy, or no, not Dorothy, Resty.
Okay, so a couple days in, as we mentioned earlier, it seems like every time we'd go to the school, you would cling, or children would cling to you, and there was always a special one. And I had several special ones, but one in particular that really just got a hold of me. Her little name was Resty Nabakuza. And that day, she is one that when we were presenting the schools with porridge, she was behind me as we were standing there, and she kind of tapped me and she says, "Thank you for bringing food for our school." And as the day progressed, I got to know her a little bit more. She was 10 years old. And just, again, I said, when they thank you for something like that, our kids take stuff like that for granted, but she was just thanking us for bringing that to their school. So that day, she kept appearing to me throughout the day, and that happened to be one of the schools where we had the tournament at the end. So during the morning, we would go to a school, do our thing, get on the bus, and leave. Well, this time we got there, we did our thing, but we stayed because of that tournament. So Resty was attached at my hip there that whole time, and I was asking her if she wanted to write. I have a journal back there, so it's kind of hard to understand everything they say, so I thought, I'm going to have her write some things down for me. So I just thought I would read to you what she wrote in my book towards the end of our day together. So I started writing in it by saying, "Today I met a very special little girl. Her name is Nabakuza Resty." And she wrote her name because I couldn't understand it. She is 10 years old, and when she grows up, she wants to be, and she kind of took over from here. So she says she wants to be a doctor. At school, we speak English. At home, speak Luganda. I want ball, pen, books, and school fees, uniforms, shoes, pencils. And earlier in the day, I had given her a little notebook, and I wrote in there that, Jesus loves you, and you are my sister in Christ. So she refers to me a lot in her writing as her sister. So she says, "I love my sister," and she wanted me to write my full name, so I wrote my name in there. She says, "She is bright, she is very good, and me, I am number first. She give me pencil and pen, she give me small paper notebook. In my class, I am very bright. I listen very good. I have 4 sisters and 1 brother. I am good like my sister called Heather May Cordes. I am in primary 5, so that's what we talk about school. She's in P5. She says in she. They write a little differently. So she's saying in she face, so in my face, is very bright. I think she meant white. My mother's name is Nabatuva Noel. And she gave me her mother's phone number. And then again, she's talking about me. In she face is very white. I live in, and she spelled out her village. She loved me very much, and I love her very much. I pray for her to get life and get money very much, and God give her money to pay for my school fees and those she promised for me. I promise you I am number 1st in primary 5. Then she was talking about her teacher. She says, he teach very good. He called Mr. Isaac. He is a good teacher. You buy me a new dress, I will come to your place. In first term, I promise you, I will come and you will take me with you. So this was a little girl that was wanting me to bring her back to America, and knowing you can't do that, one of the teachers there even kind of came up and She said, you take her with you to America. And I'm like, I can't do that. Her mom's not going to let me do that. And I'll never forget that teacher looks me straight in the eyes and she said, you ask her mom? And she said, no. And I was like, no, but her mom's not going to let me take her. So I said, I'm going to pray about this. I said, I'll commit to helping pay some of her school fees. I said, I don't know what I'm going to do yet, but just know I'm going to commit to taking care of some of this. So we were kind of warned when we go, you can't just give out money. You need to do everything through the Golden Heart Foundation. For one, you want to make sure that you're not being scammed. I didn't know a lot about this little girl other than God really laid her on my heart that day, and I got to spend quite a bit of time with her. So even after we left, I asked Maggie to please look into her story because I didn't want to give where maybe I shouldn't be giving. I didn't know her full story. I said I committed to paying some of her school fees, so when I left money with Maggie to pay her school fees. So Maggie went to the school. I also left a dress that I had taken, because in her thing she wanted a dress, and I thought, I have a dress. So Maggie took this dress to her at school, sent me a picture of her with my dress, but she got some history on her. So I wondered, why did God put this girl in my path? So the history that came back is she doesn't know her father. Her mother, she has the 4 siblings. One of her older but younger sisters got pregnant. Her mother is the only provider for their home, and her mother's source of income is she runs a brewery in her home. So she attracts all the drunks to come and get their liquor from their home. And that's most likely how her sister became pregnant. A few weeks, 3 weeks maybe, before this trip, I lost my brother, and he passed away basically from being an alcoholic his entire life. And so I'm thinking, is this why God led this little girl to me? Because she's in a bad environment dealing with alcohol. So maybe, to me, that's my connection to Resty. And if I can save her from that environment, my goal would be to be able to put her into the boarding school or orphanage or whatever you want to, however you want to call it, but to get her out of that environment, to get her where she's in a better school. Maggie did tell me that the school she's currently in is not a good school. So I'm contemplating and praying about if I want to commit to getting her into a better school out of that environment. So that's my story about my little Resty. And there are so many children there that need help. I know going there we can't help them all, but if we can help some, my goal is that I can help Resty and she can get an education and get a job and maybe then help others in her community.
So before we went over there, I knew about the orphan children. I knew that there were children struggling, just simply talking to Bryce, who had been there before. And so one of the team members that went there before had seen children sleeping on a dirt floor with about 12 other kids in a little hut, found it unacceptable, said, we got to change this. So he paid for this home to be built right there on the bottom left. And that home is built right next to the Golden Heart Foundation office. And you can see the interior pictures there. And 3 kids by the family that built that home reside in that home with a caretaker. And so I knew about this, and then when we showed up as a team to this home, the kids, oh man, it was so emotional. It was because we knew who had built the home, we knew who was sponsoring the kids. They had a special connection with Pappy here, and you just started bawling. And it was a very touching moment. Because 2 of the 3 kids were in the home when we visited it. So I'd kind of known about the need to help orphans. And the 3 kids that were there, they had no parents. And so, I had this tugging on my heart, or this prayer with God, like, Lord, I just give me the heart of the people that I'm with. I see them pouring out this love. I want that same heart. And, I connected with the kids, and I I felt impacted by seeing the conditions they were living in. But the girl on the bottom left there, I saw her standing in line to get a math set. And God made it clear to me, you need to find out more about her. So I said, okay. I'm not sure why. So I grabbed Dennis, because I need a translator. I said, Dennis, I want to talk to that girl. He said, okay. So he grabs her and her teacher. I said, I want to know more about her. So he starts telling me her dad abandoned her and her 3 siblings at the age of 4 years old. Her mother died, disappeared one day a number of years prior, and wound up dead. So she was living with her grandma in this home. The grandma provides for the kids through a vegetable garden. She sells vegetables. Unia, that was her name, Unia Nabatanzi. She was not able to go to school for 3 years because her family couldn't afford it. So she should have been in 7th grade, but she was only in 4th grade. She told me she wanted to be a pastor when she grew up. Her teacher said she's the prefect of her class. She's the older kid in the class, and she does a very good job of leading the class. So I told Dennis, I said, listen, I'm not committing to anything. I need to talk to my wife about it. I need to pray about it. I don't know. I might not be called to help at all. And prayed about it. God made it pretty clear I was going to help this little girl somehow, some way. And I asked Maggie, how can I help? Well, we can either put them in the home that was built on the Golden Heart property, or we can put her in the same school that those kids go to, a boarding school. So she'll stay at the school, and she'll go home on weekends and holidays. And I think that's the best option because her siblings, it would be best for her to go back and see them. I said, okay. Well, I talked to my wife, and she said, if you feel led, I'm okay with it. And then, I've got Bruce here. We're talking about it one morning. He's like, I want to get this thing started now. And he throws money down on the table, and so the process just started. And so my family is paying for Unia to go to boarding school. And I get updates back from Maggie on how she's doing. She's struggling in school because she's missed so much school. But the school that they're at, it's a Christian school. It's, again, the same school. You can see the fourth picture over there with the kids in blue and the red. 3 of those kids are the kids staying in the home. One of them is Dorothy on the very left there. That is Dawn Van Haften, who's not with us today. That was with the team. She met her on the trip and got her into the boarding school. And Unia is there on the right. And so every now and then I get a nice update and a nice picture of Unia talking with Maggie. Why don't you talk about meeting David at the school? The picture up there in the upper left-hand corner. So David is one of the 3 kids that stays in the home, but yet he stays at the boarding school. He lives there full-time. But that was very emotional going in and seeing him.
Yeah, we were at the orphanage that morning, and it was Dawn's birthday. So we had a birthday cake. I don't know where the cake came from. Maggie got the cake someplace, but anyway, we were able to eat some birthday cake with Jeffrey and Ruth. They were 2 of the other little children that were at the home, and we asked Maggie if we could go to the boarding school and meet David. And David was a brother to Ruth and to Jeffrey. And she said, sure, we'll go over there. So we went over. It was just a couple of miles away. And we were sitting in a room waiting. And David comes in the room. And oh my goodness, the floodgates just opened up. I started bawling like a stinking little baby, And David started crying. And then Anna started crying. Everybody was crying. I think we probably scared David half to death. He didn't know what was going on. All these white people sitting there bawling. He thought maybe, I don't know what happened, But again, just so, and I think there's a video later on of David in there, Aaron?
Not in here.
Not in here? Okay. I didn't know for sure. But these little kids are just so appreciative of everything that they get. And to know that we as a church are a part of making a difference in people's lives, and knowing that people will take the initiative and give and sacrifice so that other people can thrive in life. Rather than just exist, they can thrive. And it's just so awesome.
So Maggie and her team, I shared this on Facebook. It's a video. It was this is David's grandma, and this is the story of David and his two siblings.
When we first received them, we took them through an interview. So now we have identified that they have not yet mastered the reading. And this is what the teachers are really working on. And there is a very big improvement. We shall build a career in future. We are Christian-founded school. We teach them how to pray, they respect God, and we believe that if we give the students this basic education, they will have a better life in the future.
Amanya gange nze David, Unia, Geoffrey, Lucy, Dorothy. Nebaza Mukama eyampa essomero lino. Ssomero ddungi nnyo. Ewaka gye nnali mbeera twali tubeera ne jjajja ng'abaana tuliyo bangi. Ng'okulya kiba kizibu, emmere ng'olumu ebula. 2, 3, 4. Nali siina ng'ebitabo olumu peni zibula ng'ate ne school fees nga bangoba nnyo ku ssomero.
Engeri gye tubeera mu nnyumba mu wano wasulawo bana, kuli n'ensulako n'abazzukulu 2, abalala basula eri mu kisenge kiri ekirala. David yali asula ku kino, kyekyali ekya taatawo. Booda emabega yonna nga yetuyimirizaawo n'okutandika ozimba enju eno n'oggula akafo kano. Taatawo olwamuteera enju awo we yakoma, booda baagitwala. Obutasoma bw'abali abaana bange bwe buleetedde abazzukulu nabo obutasoma. Olw'okuba tebasobola kufuna mirimu gireeta ssente, kulaba nti balabirira abaana baabwe. Sirina mulimu gwe nkola, nnimawo bumere bwakulya, ate era akatundu ke kano kwotetenkanya olinajja ekkalaamu. Obulwadde obusinga okubaluma musujja n'okukolola, n'entema ku biyembe ng'ebyo oluusi bwe mba nsobodde ne mbafumbira olw'okukolola, n'ennyenga ku mululuuzi ogwo olw'omusujja. Kati nali ndi wano, omukyala maama Margaret Nakavubu najja ng'awulidde ensaba obuyambi. Najja nannyambako ku baana abo bamulekwa, abazzukulu bennina 24, nannyambako abaana 3 n'abatwala. David Mukalazi, ne Geoffrey Nsubuga, ne Lucy Nalwanga. Bannange mbasuubiramu bingi, bajja kufuna omugaso, bajja kuwulira muli mu mutima, bawulire essanyu, basobole okufuna emirimu, bayambibwe n'okuyamba bannaabwe, n'okuyamba ensi yaabwe n'eggwanga lyabwe. Bali mu ssomero eddungi n'amaka amalungi we basula. Era neebaza ekitongole ekyo ekya Golden Heart okubeera ne mukyala Nakavubu ne basobola okunnyamba ku bazzukulu abo. Neeyongera okwebaza Jjajja Bryce olw'okulabirira n'obuyambi bw'abo abazzukulu bange. Mbeebaza nnyo era nsaba Mukama abongere omukisa.
Kati nsoma bulungi, ebitabo mbiyina, peni emmere tewali kyenneetaaga era nebaza nnyo ne bazadde bange abampeerera. Abaana abo abatasoma batera okufuuka abayaga nga bakuze. Abaana abo bayita mu bulumi. Nye nange mbaagaliza basobole okufuna ababayamba nga nze, kubanga kati nange omuntu asobola okubeera awo n'anneegombako.